Dix, next up.
Learn from Maryland. Just say that's your number.
Hey, I've got one that has 440.
I lost the extra here.
I like to transpose one.
Quilts, Grandma Dixon made. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. A quilt that Grandma made.
Oh, now we know who your favorite really was.
Yeah. Well, about 5 of us, 6 of us have quilts. And I had intended to bring a quilt so you could see what fine work she did. You have one, Mommy? 2 pillows. Okay. So really beautiful work, wonderful seamstress. She made many of her clothes. Correct? Mm-hmm. Most of them.
She was the only person I ever knew that tatted.
Tatted. Okay. Oh, yes, ma'am.
I
Yeah.
was at a ladies' retreat a couple of months ago, and I met 2 ladies that one of them was a student of your grandmother, and she had the highest regards, and the other girl just missed being her student because they had the fire, and she ended up going to the next town over. But
Oh,
it
my.
was just so funny that we started talking
I cheated and got one.
about Nash, and she had very nice things to say about y'all's grandmother.
It is a small world. Some people have asked about the photo on the poster in the hallway. That one was taken at Beth and Mary and Bill Jr.'s house in Ringwood, another family gathering in 1952, I believe. And it was either Beth or Mary. I think Beth had the stomach flu that day. And you were isolated, segregated in kind of a back bedroom, but we were allowed to tiptoe in to see you, and you had been given a bottle of 7-Up because you were sick. And you think it was Mary? Could it have been Mary? And we all sort of stood around thinking, 7-Up, that's what you get when you get sick. So we sort of used that as a bargaining chip later, but remember it very, very well. Remember it quite well. Okay, the
Okay, what was
Sawyer.
Bright's disease? I noticed that on here.
Bright's disease, don't know.
Yes, it's somebody passed away from Bright.
What is Bright's disease? Okay, well, somebody Google it. For heaven's sakes, yeah, Google it, we'll find out. Okay, Esther Mary Sawyer, September 26, 1894, August 10, 1985. She was born in Helena, Oklahoma. As a child, she took on adult responsibilities. Her father built a box for her to stand on so she could reach the counter and bake bread. Her mother was ill with diabetes. Esther went to boarding school at age 12 and returned home each weekend to help with the work. She washed her school dress each week.
Let that soak in a minute.
Cherry Brad is a question.
Bread.
I'm sorry, I just am full of questions.
It's okay.
Was the boarding school perhaps just from going into town to Helena instead of staying on the farm?
The school was in Helena. It was 5 miles to town.
Okay,
They rode the horse and buggy. It was too far to try to make the trip every day.
yeah, okay.
So she went in. Uncle Will took her on Monday morning and picked her up on Friday afternoon.
Live with the family during the week?
I think they did live with families, but I'm not going to say that for sure. But I believe it was with the family. But she had 2 dresses. She'd wear one for the whole week, and then on the weekend she'd clean that up, but changed. Then the next week she'd have a different dress to wear. And that's the way she lived most of her school years.
Thank you.
Who was asking about Bright? I did.
Yes, Marilyn, did you find it?
Yeah, it's acute kidney failure, kidney disease, renal
Okay,
Yeah, Matt found
okay.
Grandma Dixon.
There's that picture on Love Again at the World's Fair. She and her mother with some other folks in a touring car during the World's Fair.
Where? Which,
San Francisco,
point them out on the photo.
okay? Let's see if I know how to go backwards here. Of course, this is Grandma in the tan, looks like a tan, sort of French hat, and I believe this is her mother right here.
Actually, I think Esther is in the second seat far over in kind of a beret.
Oh,
Right, I said tan.
Yeah.
Oh,
said beret.
Okay.
Sofa, couch, divan, love seat, settee.
Synonyms, we call them.
We can duke it out later.
Oh, the English teacher has heard from Shape Up.
Oh, she married Emil Dixon October 15th, 1919 in Helena. They lived on a farm and raised chickens, beef, and had a garden. The family sold their wheat. Children often paid for their school lunches with milk from their farm. Esther earned a college degree and was a well-respected teacher for over 30 years and beyond, as just was said. That's the town that you can't get to from here sometimes, driving into Nash. And Monty, one of your children's middle name is Nash. Which one? Evan Nash. Okay. That's a picture of Emil and Esther we're pretty familiar with.
How did they meet?
How did they meet? And George, Cleeta's answering all the questions.
Well, she's older than I am. You know, I'm just a young pup.
Dad had a cousin that lived in Helena by the name of Dixon, and he had gone to visit him, and Mother was teaching in the area, and France thought Dad needed to meet this teacher. And he arranged this meeting, and I don't know all the particulars, but Mother was dating some other guy at the time, and Dad saw that as competition right away, and he stepped in. And all of my growing up years, I remember Dad talking about this guy, but never in a very friendly tone. Anyway, obviously, Dad won the battle.
I had that picture at home that Daddy and Cecilia got painted from a guy when they were in Japan or when she was, and they painted that, and I've got that picture at my house, and it's really pretty.
Okay. So, Esther's father, George Augustus Sawyer, born in Madison, Dane County, Wisconsin, died in Helena, Oklahoma, married Mary Clementine Race on October 10, 1877 in Wisconsin, and eventually moved to Kansas. Their children, Pearl, Bertha, Will, Esther, and Victor. In 1893, he made a scouting trip into the Cherokee Strip, searching for a homestead. He found the land he wanted and returned to Harper County, Kansas to prepare for the run. During the land run, a Sooner slipped in ahead of the official race time and made claim to the land George Augustus previously selected. What happened next? George Augustus Sawyer returned to Kansas, and 6 months later, the Sooner died. His widow notified her neighbors, who in turn contacted George about taking the land. He and Mary sold personal possessions in Kansas and had the cash to hire a carpenter, and together they built a house on the land they had originally desired.
Neat story.
Another kind of what if, somebody didn't die or did die, or, yes, Aaron,
Do we know where that is?
we do.
Probably next slide, right?
No.
The house, let me tell you, the
Stick with the
house,
script, Rich.
Yeah, by the way, that farmhouse has since been moved to Ringwood, Oklahoma, and people live in it. In fact, Stanley located the house there and took my brother Albert and myself by it one day.
Hey, Sherry, when Grandma had her stroke and they found her, she had gone back to that homestead.
Right.
And they took her in and called Mom, and she went up and got her, but she went home, even though she was confused and couldn't find her own home, she found her child home.
She had a stroke and went to the original homestead. Her childhood home.
Actually, there was a sod house on the property when they got the house. And the family lived in that sod house until Mother was 6. And they lived there until Mother was born in 94. And they went ahead and moved right as soon as they got, the property became available. And Mother was born in 94, and then they moved into the regular farmhouse the year that Victor was born. And that Mother was 6 when he was born.
So there was a sod house on the property when they got it. They built the house.
They built the house.
Sold their possessions in Kansas and built the house.
They sold their house in order to be able to go. Their stuff in Kansas.
Mrs. Sawyer was expecting Esther when they made the trip.
Right.
Right. So this is a very old, faded picture, but it is the Sawyer's place near Helena, Oklahoma. Again, hard scrapple, primitive, bare, austere life. And I don't know, at one time we knew what the names were of the kids and who was who. Do we know, Brad?
no, is that the house that is now in Ringwood?
Yes.
Yes, I'm sure that's right, yeah.
Okay.
Interesting. Okay. You'll have to make a field trip, Matt.
Yeah, do you know where that's at, George?
It's well, I've been to it one time, but it's kind of in the northeast part of town. It's a small town, Ringwood is, but it's kind of in the northeast part from the main drag. You kind of turn off and go back up to the northeast.
If we brought it up on Google Maps, we could point it out.
I don't know whether it could or not.
Huh.
Like I say, I've only been there once.
Ringwood's not that big. We could take the picture and just go door to door, couldn't we?
Good plan. So, around 1894, the remaining scrap wood from the house was used to build a wardrobe, and eventually was passed on to Esther. After her death, the wardrobe remained in the family storage until 1992, until it was removed from storage, lifted by 4 men, loaded into a trailer, and transported to Penny's house in Ohio. She later moved to Tulsa, and so did the wardrobe. And at 119 years old is one of her family's treasures. We just happened to have a picture.
Can I tell a story?
Yes.
When we moved from Ohio to Tulsa in a moving company, Allied Moving Company, the people, the 4 movers came in, and my wife sat them down on the couch and told the story of this piece of furniture to them, and she responded, "If you damage that, just keep on going."
So to think that original scrap wood from that original Sawyer homestead.
Pretty good job.
So all of you load up, go to Penny's house in Tulsa and take a look at it. It's there.
Is that the same wardrobe that Grandma Dixon had out in that little extra house?
Yes.
Extra building?
That's it.
Yeah, and it didn't look like that. I mean, I put layers and layers of Old English and types
Lot of work.
furniture wax, but it brought out all of those neat colors.
And the quality of the wood. So this is a photo of George Augustus and Mary Race Sawyer. And of course it depicts the time frame of the Cherokee Strip land run. This is a photo not of anybody in our family directly. Penny, remind me.
Fred Packard.
Fred Packard,
His
who's
Bertha's husband.
Bertha's husband. And it's such a great photo of, I don't know, the advertising, the store advertising. You can see the laundry soap advertising, the boxes of canned corn they're leaning on, their mustaches, their hats. Just cool, just very, very cool.
Fred Packard was an entrepreneur that after he married Bertha, he went to California. And they lived in California, up in the mountain region in California. And he ran a store up there, and that was part of his store and the things that he did.
Great, very good. So, George Augustus' father, George Henry Sawyer. So, Uncle George, you just didn't have a chance when it came to the name George, did you? It's just everywhere. George Henry was born in Whittingham County, Vermont. Died in Brattleboro, Vermont. Married twice, first to Phoebe Ann Reed in 1851, and their children, William, George, May, and according to the census, they had a servant by the name of Mary Gray. George Henry's occupation in 1860 was listed as a produce dealer in Milwaukee, and after Phoebe died, he later married her sister, Hattie. George Henry Sawyer. The big photo on the easel, on the display, and here. Now, we all think that that looks like my dad, Stanley. The contour of the jaw and the long face, and so this is Esther's grandfather. Esther's grandmother, Phoebe Ann Reed Sawyer, another one of the big pictures on the display. So, George Henry's father, Phineas Houghton or Houghton, Penny?
I always say Houghton, but
Houghton Sawyer. 1779-1845, Phineas was born in Templeton, Massachusetts, died in Whittingham County, Vermont, married Rebecca Orcutt in February of 1803. Their children, Houghton, Mary, Emery, Abner, you'll hear more about Abner here in a moment, George Henry, and Amos. Now again, we don't know where the descendants are of all of these individual names that you see on this screen, do we? I mean, there are a lot of Sawyers here listed, but a lot of them boys, but we don't know what happened to them. So, as you know, no communication, poor transportation. You know, there may be somebody having a family reunion today whose name is Sawyer, whose ancestor is Abner, and they're talking about all of us. Phineas's father, Abner Sawyer, May 9, 1742, September 4, 1779. So he would have been 37 when he died. Abner was born in Bolton, Worcester County, Massachusetts, buried in Templeton, Massachusetts, married Hannah Piper. on May 26, 1763. And we have his Revolutionary War service documented. Now, several years ago, how many years, Penny, did you start the DAR process?
08.
About 8 years ago, Penny wanted to try to take this journey to authenticate whether or not she could trace an ancestor to someone in the Revolutionary War so that she could be a daughter of the American Revolution. And once Penny was able to do that, then we knew that her daughters, me, her sister, and all of you girls in this room could do the same thing. And if you are a guy, then it would be the Sons of the American Revolution. Now, that organization has had a stellar and not so stellar reputation over the years. Very discriminatory, highly sort of elitist at one time, but most of their mission now is devoted to veterans projects. And so her goal, and then I kind of piggybacked onto that, was just to kind of authenticate whether or not they would, in Washington, D.C., accept the documents to say that, yes, we had an ancestor whom we could prove fought in the Revolutionary War. So his Revolutionary War service is documented as entering the military on August 21st, 1777. Awarded a field commission to the rank of first lieutenant in 1778. Served under Captain Josiah Wilder, the 12th Company, 7th Worcester Regiment. Worcester? So, Abner Sawyer is considered your patriot. And if you are a direct descendant of grandmother Sawyer Dixon, you are a daughter or son of the American Revolution. Kind of cool.
It is.
Kind of cool. And there are college scholarships available, by the way.
Oh, that means like.
So there you go.
Too late now, they're about done.
His gravesite in Templeton, Massachusetts. His father, Thomas Sawyer. Thomas married Elizabeth Osgood. And Penny, that's about as far back as we can go, right? We can't yet go to the European connection on the Sawyer side. Do any of you have any more information prior to Abner Sawyer? Did you know that you were a son of the American Revolution? And that it's been documented? Now you know. That and 25 cents. So, the Sawyers move across the country, went from Massachusetts, Vermont, Wisconsin, Kansas, and Oklahoma. Whoops, didn't mean to do that, Touched the wrong button. Wanted to thank Penny for her work on that, and my mom too, because she made copies of a whole lot of these pictures years and years and years ago and distributed them, I think, to various family members. So that's our mom. Good picture.
Mother always said she was of Scottish heritage, and that her family all came from Scotland. Dad always said his family all came from England, so you have changed that theory today. Since you're saying the Dixons came from Scotland, I'm a little surprised at that.
He didn't have Ancestry.com.
Oh, but anyway, Mother always believed she was Scottish. And our expression Scottish, and Dad thought he was pure English. He was determined that he was pure English. So, and Dad always said the greatest voting mistake he ever made was Franklin D. Roosevelt. First time he ran for office. Those are my two big deals of the day. Okay.
Cherry.
And,
Abner, he died in 1779. Is that right?
Is that what we said, Penn?
Yes. There are
The
so
revolution was still going on then. Did he die in service or something else, or do we know?
That's what we're thinking.
We don't know. I can't find any record, and the DAR has no record of him in combat, but we don't know. But it could have been from the effects of combat. He could have had an injury. DAR didn't have that information, but there are several other women and men who have used Abner Sawyer as their descendant. So it's interesting. We have so many cousins, distant cousins all over the U.S. using Abner Sawyer as their direct descendant, just like we are. That's why his grave is constantly decorated, I think, because people still live around the area and visit his grave. And they also decorate his wife's grave.
Well, and just a comment, you know, when you start doing the research on this, you have kind of a vague idea about where you think you want to go. And keep in mind, you see how many Marys and how many Georges, and they're Joseph Sr. and Joseph Jr., and you can just go in all kinds of directions, and it's very easy to become inaccurate. And Penny has been working for years to ensure that so, you know, it's the best that we know now, and it may be with the cloud, and I was going to have, some of you know about the cloud. It's a concept that's difficult to understand, but the cloud, as I understand it, will be able to store all of our personal information, our DNA, our physical makeup, our hair color, our eye color, everything about us in future generations. And we will be able to virtually go into the cloud, find that information, and bring it back to further authenticate something. And whether or not the prior generation's information will be in the cloud, again, it's hard to, it is sort of scary.
Or you can get it from NSA now.
Oh, there you go. Who would have thought? We're going to get through this. Now, have the posters been around? I was on the phone with George, I don't know, maybe about a year ago, and he was telling about this goat. And I couldn't believe what I was hearing, and we asked more questions about the goat, and it just motivated me to write a little children's story. And, you know, children's stories are sort of silly. This is the silly part, Brad. A little bit based on fact. It's been embellished a bit, but I hope they can add some more information to this little story. Should a goat wear a coat? A short, believable tale. T-A-L-E. This is a true story about a special goat kid who lived with the Dixon kids on the hill in Nash. Gordon Goat and Greta Goat were tired and crabby. "There's nothing to do," complained Greta. "There's no one to play with," complained Gordon. "You kids are making me nervous," mooed Clara the cow. "Stop whining," clucked Charlie the chicken. "Hey, get a human to play with you," whinnied Hannah the horse. "Sometimes you get a carrot treat." But Paul the pig snorted, "Gordon and Greta, just stay out of my way. I want to know what the humans are having for supper." "We could chase the cat," cried Greta. "Nah," replied Gordon. "That's no fun. How about a ball game?" "That's no fun either. What can we do?" sighed Greta. "I know. Let's go ask Oscar Owl." you how your Uncle Billy passed the time when he was your age and had nothing to do, hooted Oscar Owl. Billy went to live with the Dixons when he was a baby. They loved Billy very much. They played games with him. They fed him from a baby's bottle. Later, Billy munched on the best grass. Sometimes he slept in a bed in the house. So, on the hill in Nash, Billy the Kid grew up having fun with the Dixon kids too. This is Albert, George, and Billy.
Which one's yours?
Which one is George? Lita and the other Dixon girls had doll dresses and real baby shirts, said Oscar Owl. They dressed baby Billy in all kinds of cute clothes. Auntie Gracie Goat stood in a corner listening to Oscar tell the story, and she shook her head. It was quite pitiful and quite embarrassing, she said. That's how Goat was, kind of, sort of. Yes, Billy had the most fun, said Oscar the Owl, when he got to play dress up. Greta gasped, but a goat can't wear human clothes. And Gordon had to ask, no, can a goat really wear a coat? Billy was just like one of the other kids. And sometimes Esther had to remind the human kids to take care of their baby when he cried. When Billy was lonely, sometimes he would cry. You kids better get your baby, the Dixon mother Esther would say. Your baby is crying. And everyone would cuddle Billy and laugh, smiled Oscar. And sometimes Billy got really carried away. I look great in these boots, thought Billy. I hope that kid George won't care if I wear his fine boots around the barnyard while I'm looking for a snack. He thinks he's so cute, mused Clara the cat. So you see, kids, your Uncle Billy found plenty to do when he was your age, said Oscar the Owl. I'll bet if you try very hard, you can find something fun to do too. But Greta and Gordon weren't saying too much. They wandered out to the barnyard and walked slowly toward the clothesline. The end. Okay, George, we gotta hear the real scoop on this goat.
Well, the only thing really I remember is Cleta and I she had a doll bed on rockers. And we'd put that doll or goat in there and cover him up. And as long as we would stay there with him, he'd lay there like a baby. But once she moved, he shot out of there like a bullet. You remember that? Outside of that, he'd eat anything that got in his way, like mother's hose or anything. Anything hanging on the clothesline, it was gone. So that's about all I remember. We did end up eating him. It turned out all right.
Are any children under 12?
We did feed them with a bottle part of the time, and we play with them for hours in the summertime. But, when we got tired, they didn't get tired. And we'd go in the house and leave them out there on the back porch, and then they'd stand out there and bleat. And Mother'd get mad. She'd get tired listening to them, and she'd make us go back out there and play with them some more.
Got tired, just ate them. Got tired of eating them.
After they got big enough,
You ate them.
then Dad butchered them. That's the way it was. Now the lamb they sold, because Dad wouldn't eat sheep. No way, he wasn't going to eat that dirty sheep. But he'd eat that goat. And she'd cook it and serve it, and she wouldn't tell us what it was till after we'd already eaten. And then after we'd eaten it, she'd tell us it was the goat. That was our pet. She wasn't gonna eat it.
Didn't anybody wonder where the goat went?
Yeah, well, we all knew Dad had butchered it. We were there. Well, life is, and life was tough, and we didn't have a lot of meat in those days, so that's the way it was.
Well, once that goat got big enough, full grown, it got pretty ornery.
Oh, yeah.
And you'd step outside and you better be ready, because he'd get you, he'd horn you. Yeah, or butt you, whatever. And so we got to where we were about ready to.
He was about ready to eat him.
Again. Who had the camera?
Yeah, we wondered it was some of these old.
What kind was it?
It was a Kodak.
A Kodak, you opened it and slid it out. And finally, it wore out to a point where from the lens to the part that transferred it to the film.
The bellow.
Yeah, it got
Bellows,
light, it got a leak and it got light through there and it wouldn't work. But
It was just paper.
all of the pictures you see from that time were taken with
So
that
you
camera.
had to take that film someplace to
Excuse me, yes.
into Nash or Enid or something?
Yeah.
We had to mail it off for years. We mailed it somewhere. Then it was quite expensive to get it developed in money.
The older children, my mom thought George and Cleta had the easiest time on the farm. Bring the stand, the older guys. I think it was even dearer. Well, they had the Depression and coming out of the
That's right.
Dust Bowl and all that stuff, so.
Well, that's true. That's really true. By the time I came along, times had gotten 300% better, really.
How old were you, George, when they got a car?
Well, they had a car when I was born. There just weren't any tires to drive it. Well, now this was partially due to the war effort.
Yeah, but they lived out of town.
Yeah, and then we had an old 28 model Buick in the garage up on blocks because the tires were worn so thin and they couldn't buy tires to fit. And by the time the war was over, the size of the tires, they couldn't buy them no longer. They didn't make them anymore. So I remember Dad bought strips of rubber and we glued it on those tires. And you'd be driving down the road and one of those strips would come loose and it'd go ka-wump, 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 as it hit the fender on the old car. But anyway, that's until we traded that car off and got another one. That's kind of what it was.
And that was a Buick?
Yes. Well, that old 37 Buick. We mostly walked.
What did you and I and grandparents go to Stringtown in?
That old Roadmaster 37 Buick.
And it was allowed to go 20.
Yeah, 25 or 30, yeah.
And if it got up close to that, Grandma started yelling.
Well, he about pressed the floorboard out on the offside.
Is that the car?
No, that's somebody else's car. It looks similar to that. That's not
For
it.
some reason, George.
No, okay. That was a copy of Wayne's photo with Cleta. Yeah.
George, I think that's my dad's car.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, it's not ours. Yeah. That looks like a Chevrolet or something.
See, now I know what I did yesterday.
No, I was
1902.
We were talking at the break about watching Grandma, which probably traumatized us for life, butcher chickens, Beth and Mary and I. And, she would take clothespins often, at least the times that I saw her, and clothespin their feet to the clothesline. And then kind of hold down the beak of the head, and he's right, his closing his ears, and whack off the head, and then unclip the feet, and then let it flop around a little bit on the ground.
My mother invented the broomstick method, because she put a broomstick over their necks.
Yes, and pulled it up. Yeah.
Which we prefer not to do, but
Yeah.
You just stepped on their feet.
Did you?
You just stepped on their feet.
And, oh, and that was it.
That was it. Slow walk. Just
Uh,
get out of the way. so
Brad,
you
do
can
you
ride.
remember, I know you have a question, but do you remember when you and Tom and I, Mother and Daddy, would drive up to see Grandma and Grandpa, and it would have rained, and the little bridge in that lane that you'd have to get through it was so muddy to get up the lane, and it would wash out with every rain, and it would be so muddy, and Mother would plead with Daddy not to try to go through that. And he would always say, I think I can make it. And he'd get out, he'd walk all around the car, and he'd examine the four wheels, and we knew not to say a word. Because if it went well, that would be great, but if it didn't go well, then it wouldn't be a good thing. So often it did not go well, and he would carry us and make as many trips as it took from the car to carry us kid by kid up the hill, and then come back down and get the next kid and go back up to the house, and then maybe the next day he could go try to dig out and see if he could make it. So, and being at their house so late at night and being so dog tired and sleepy as a kid, and having water heated and being put in a galvanized tub to be given a bath before we had our pajamas put on us and go back in the car and go home. And then who could forget the outhouse experience? Yeah, never forget it. Brad, what was your question?
Let me say, you remember a whole lot more of that than I do, given that you're quite a bit older than I am. I've got a George and Cleta question. How long did your dad continue to work painting and decorating homes? And do you, either of you, had memory or knowledge of him making his own paint?
No, Dad never made paint. He never made paint. He bought his paint. He would only add the linseed oil to it to mix it and thin it down. But he bought the basic construction of the paint. And it was Great Western paint that he always used, because he was very determined that his paint would be more excellent and better than anyone else's paint. He was a perfectionist when it came to paint.
Oh, really?
And he would use the very best grade of paint. And he thinned it, it was always oil-based, and he thinned it with linseed oil. Okay? And was very careful. I was 13 the last painting he ever did. And that's when he had his stomach ulcer attack, and that was the last time he was ever able to work. Okay? George, you want to add to that?
No, that's right.
Somebody else finished his last job.
Second grade.
Yeah, someone had to finish his last job.
George,
Yes.
can you tell the story about moving them off the hill to town?
Well,
Particularly about the shoestrings.
of course, Dad never threw anything away to speak of. In fact, when I came home on leave from the Army and found out they'd sold the farm and the house and bought a place in town, I borrowed a pickup from Keith Carnes, Rita's husband, and I moved him to town. Well, the last load I was throwing away stuff, and a bunch of his old shoes were in that load. And he called me over and he said, "Kid," he said, "get out there and pull the shoestrings out of those shoes." He said, "We may need to." I did. He was a little conservative.
George, we need to work on that story a bit, because I was in the 6th grade and I was with you.
If you were, that's right.
That's right, and we got ready to throw away the shoes, and I was sitting on the end of the pickup, taking the shoestrings out, and what did Uncle George say? "Oh, hell, just throw those shoes over the side."
question or a story. Penny, what are you working on now? Kind of what's your next?
I'm ready for a break now.
Well, I know, but what do you intend to do next?
Actually, I was gonna start mall on
Oh.
one side.
Okay.
So, and a lot of that I also have documents for that, so I can prove some of that. But I was ready to go on to Thomas, Sawyer, because I did stop with Abner,
Okay.
because that's all DAR requires.
So your goal is to try to go beyond that.
Right.
And if you discover that, you'll share that.
Sure.
Monty?
Does anybody have Grandma Dixon's chicken noodle recipe?
As a matter of fact, as a matter of fact, my little bride knows how to do that. But if anybody can get her to do it, they.
And Mary Louise.
You know how to cook the noodles?
You know how to do chicken and noodles, Mary?
Her secret though was the basic noodle, and she put real cream in there with the eggs, and she only made egg yolks, and then she put real cream in there to thin that down a little bit, and then of course flour, and she cut them about this wide, which is a lot wider than I cut mine. But then when she cooked them in the broth,